Hello everyone, welcome back to another live Instagram call. Today we're going to be speaking with Justin Nope of 222 Consulting. He'll be joining us shortly. This is our second chat with Justin. He is one of my accelerated learning business coaches, and he's going to be speaking about the topic which is value metrics. And he's going to be joining any second now. Kirash, hello. Thank you for joining in as well. Gagan, hello. Thank you for joining in from London. Hey, Justin, how are you?
Hey, Jason, I'm good. How are you doing?
Very good, very good. My cousin actually just joined in from London. And then, of course, you originally reside from England. So I didn't want you to think that I was speaking about you.
No, 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 of course. Yeah,
How goes it? How's your
yeah.
day thus far?
Fantastic. Can't complain. Very productive, puppies and coffee. What more can you ask for?
Amazing, amazing. So I started off the conversation just before you joined in. Sorry for the siren going on in the background. Just about that, this is our second conversation, that today's topic is on value metrics, and that you are, my accelerated business coach and consultant. You run a company called 222 Consulting, and you're based in California now, but you have clientele of various aspects of business all around the world that you work either in person or digitally. But if you don't mind just explaining what 222, how you got the name of that consulting company, just for those, and share a little bit about your story for those that are new into our conversation together.
Sure. The original idea is how do you come up with a name that really shares and puts your best foot forward? Like I remember you saying to me, you always want to put your best foot forward. And so how can I summarize what it is that I do when there's so many applications of particularly what I'm interested in and what I help people with. And so 222 came up where I was like, I want to represent the brain and how important the brain is to invest in. And the best way to do that was with this idea of the brain uses 22% approximately, of course, 22% of all of the energy of the body, but it takes up approximately 2% of your body mass. So 2
Amazing.
to 22, yeah, exactly. So
Ah,
that's
that's
where it came
very
from.
cool. I love that. And we met a few years back now, and we've worked together in terms of working on learning Italian and conversing while traveling there, to then shaping our consulting more about how to maximize, from a personal standpoint, in terms of whether it's to retain information, letting go of certain things, to sharpen my mind and like delve into the science side of it. So when we look at things like neuroplasticity, when we look at, a lot of the work that you do. Okay, this is intense today. We run, our office is right on the main street that is used for ambulances and police, so clearly something's big happening. Apologies for those that are hearing this. But today's conversation is something about was critical for our business, that really had a profound impact once we really delved further into the topic and learned how to define it and understand it and live it. And that is the topic of values. And when we were speaking and having our conversations and meetings over the past couple of months, that was a common theme that was coming up. And we were talking about, tangible ways to measure, and then research studies that back this, was the world of values. And I love that you were speaking about, this idea of the topic value metrics, and to go further and speak about that, because it's really, it has an impact on all types of businesses. So whatever sector and area that you specialize in, it can impact you in a great way. It's just for a lot of people, they may not truly understand what their values are. They haven't defined it. They may not be living it or have that in alignment with their individual lives and their professional lives. So you being a professional, can you, and a specialist in this kind of space now that you're working is, you know, how do you test your values? Like one of the things that I liked in our last conversation was about kicking the tires and doing a stress test. And if we work on that and what your definition of a value is, how to define it, then we can go into some of the topics that we've already outlined that will be running for all of our guests today.
Sure. I mean, this is a very difficult thing when you present people with this idea of choose your values. Everybody's like, well, what is a great value? It's this, it's this, it's this. And honor's a great value, and integrity. And, you know, you come up with all these adjectives, and that's ultimately the problem. And so, like, there's a lot of research that shows one of the better things to do is not to choose, but to cut away the fat. And so I say to people, probably you're going to agree with every single value that's out there. Probably you're going to find that in some context you think it's great. So don't say yes, but rather say no. And being able to choose what is not my value, what is something that I don't stand for, and being able to then, and so the next part I would say is, you know, looking at people who are, you know, in the streets, they're protesting for values that they believe in. You know, equality is a value that they believe in. And if you feel so strongly that you're willing to risk some kind of punishment for this value, that is a great way to be able to see it. Look at your past actions. How much have you stood up for something that you believed in, or how much are you prepared to sacrifice for that value? So those are two ways that you can kind of kick the tires on this, to say like, yeah, I think honesty is one of my core values. And then you ask that question, well, how many times have you, you know, stood up against someone who's lied, you know, and sacrificed that potential relationship because they were not honest? Or how many times have you actually then put yourself in a place of weakness or vulnerability because you believe in that so much? So a great way you can see this translating into business is, I believe in quality and value, but that means that you got to take less of a profit margin, you know, to provide that quality and value, because the cheaper option is not quality, but you're going to get more money. And there is no right or wrong in this, but it's a great way to be able to see, based on your decisions, based on what you can eliminate, you get down to about 4 or 5 options of what are your values.
Yes, because most people, when they are going through this exercise, if they're not working with a business consultant or a coach, they are finding on Google this list of 100 adjectives. And like you said, there's so many that if we're not actually living them, we aspire to live them and have them be something that represent our brand, our business, and, you know, to be one of the pillars of the business. But it's, once again, it can be so many different words that we're trying to connect, but it gets diluted if we have all of these values. And how does one then, now when you look at, you do define, you trim the fat of all these adjectives and all these kind of things that you're now connected to. How do you find that level of connection where you're now living those kind of values? Like, how do you hold yourselves accountable to, because I'll share a little bit about what I went through after hearing your interpretation on this.
Sure. I think one of the best ways to say is that there isn't one way to do it. And you develop a kind of values intelligence, if you want to say, which is just experience. It's just wisdom, you know, where the more you say, okay, well, these are my 5 values, and then you start living according to them. And from there, you keep reflecting and you say, well, are these my values or not? You know, like, am I really living in these values? And then you start modifying and tweaking and changing. And I think you need to acknowledge the steps that go from beginner to intermediate to someone more experienced, where you can say, in the beginning, this is what I thought. These are the broad strokes. This is my general area. And as time passes, you can really refine and focus in on what are your values. And you'll find that one word doesn't quite encapsulate it, but more there's an attitude attached to it. So language really lacks in this capacity because everybody negotiates meaning. You know, what is integrity for me is integrity, defined differently for you. But you can then base yourself around that attitude with more experience and keep reflecting and keep innovating. If that decision showed my value and my connection with this attitude, this feeling, this adjective, then what are 7 other decisions that I could make that shows that value again? You know, our values are just ways for us to create conditions of behavior and to feel good about our behavior, to feel great about our decisions as well. Not just emotionally great, but cognitively, there are so many studies that suggest that if you have parameters, conditions, if you have any kind of structure, it actually alleviates a lot of stress. Because if I say my value is quality, then I'm only going to buy the very best coffee that I can find out of the quality. And I'm either going to go for that coffee or nothing. And think about how that reduces how much stress there is in choosing coffee. Which coffee do I choose? I don't know which coffee to, no. It's that coffee, that quality or nothing. It becomes very easy to make decisions, it becomes very easy to do these. And that requires experience. So that's what I would say is going to be the easiest way.
And with that analogy of like going for the best quality of the coffee, it's not to say sometimes that you're going to have like lesser quality, and then it's a reminder to revisit these values, to being like, I'm not living in accordance with these values that I've set for myself in my business. And I think that's where also it's like we're human. There's going to be times that we don't live in accordance with our values, but it's good to reset to see what truly makes us feel our best. And we know we're going to be the best version of ourselves to, you know, on a personal or professional level, which was really a big exercise that I went through in 2017. We took over our production. We actually, from a business, I had to gut the team and really start from fresh. And that was a pivotal moment in our business. So in end of 2017, early 2018. So we're only talking really 2.5 years now of having defined values. And like you said it a little bit earlier, was it doesn't need to be a solo word, because the 3 values that we have within our business, one is a solo word with connection, but then we also have pushing the boundaries and then being defined by your actions. But then I was able to break it down with my business coach, Heinrich, to be like, well, what does connection mean? And, you know, it can mean, like you said, something different for you than it would for me. And for us, it was about scraping away the superficial to get to the core.
Right.
But on any aspect of our business, we are connecting. But for that, it's like, how do we just make sure that we delve deeper in whatever we're doing? But it resonates with us. And when we defined this, it was really something that myself and Heinrich went through. But then I needed to test it against the team to see if it was in accordance with them. And that was a really powerful exercise. And when we did this at our team retreat, we ended up spending hours going over some of them to make sure that the team was also in alignment. Because, you know, as the founder and business owner, just because I've worded it a certain way and it may mean something to me, if the team isn't fully connected to it, there's going to be an alignment issue. And for me to let go of some of the wording, if it articulates in a way that as a company we can actually live these values, that's more important. But at the same time, I shouldn't be just letting go for the sake of, you know, hey, okay, are we happy now? But you need to put in the work, and to know how much that has laid the foundation to get to where we're at now. It is something that we do go back and revisit. So I think there's a component of like purpose and connection. And speaking about purpose, I wanted to talk about that and like the process of like fulfillment. So like when we look at value metrics, you know, can we dive in a little bit more on the process as well as the purpose?
So it's very interesting, and I wanted to, I think it's a great connection between what you just mentioned, which is the idea that what's the point? Like, why should we define values? Why should we invest time into determining our values, testing out our values, especially for a business, but more specifically for a personal, just in your personal life. Let's say you don't need to define your values for your business. Your business is, something that was handed to you. Why should you even define your values? And it comes back down to what do people want out of life? And you speak to the average person, and what gives a lot of meaning, what gives a lot of feeling is fulfillment. And fulfillment usually comes, people say, well, I want to live my purpose. I want to connect with my dream job. And it's not necessarily what the data suggests. The data suggests that it's not about a perfect situation. It's about your contribution to adding value to other people. And so your values and what you choose is going to be determining your behavior and how you want to add value, how you feel you add value, and how people like to receive value from you. And ultimately, this then becomes the drive of purpose. And looking at the value metrics versus a vanity metric of how much money you get. So determining a business that's based on that, you start to, number one, take pride in the process, where you've got raving customers because they love interacting with you, because that's who you are. That's who they are. They like getting value in that way. It makes them feel good, and that makes you feel good. That makes your employees feel good, colleagues, all that kind of stuff. Good feelings. And you can't measure that. You can't put a metric on that. If I ask you, Jason, do you love your family? What would you say?
Yes.
And can I ask you to prove it with a number? Can you measure it with a metric? That's our conversation that we had last time as well.
Yes, exactly.
And it's powerful.
Yes, that's right. It's a feeling, but it's hard to actually measure that. But you said now there are machines out there that can measure the brain activity, but are people going to go to that level or have the access and the means to do something like that?
Right.
So it took me almost 5 years to work on values, yet I knew what I stood for, and I knew components that I wanted to deliver on a personal and professional level. But when I was able to define them at the end of 2017, early 2018, then I realized that the people that we had let go from the company, it wasn't necessarily their fault. They weren't people that lived the values that we finally established for the business.
Right.
So at some point, even if business is going amazing, there's gonna be friction because there's an alignment issue. And
yes.
To understand those, but then also how to look and measure them, and the whole component of why do we do this, and how are we operating at our best level, and then making sure that we're able to revisit it is something that really I was so intrigued by the topic of that. And then one of the things you brought up last time was reflecting on action points. What can you dive in further on that?
With regard to defining values or behaving on values or testing values?
Just on the value metrics of itself, in terms of reflection, action points, if you were to, from an accountability standpoint, and when you revisit your values, once you've defined them, how do you go back to just make sure that you're kind of living in accordance with them, or are you evolving and continuing to add them? One of the things is there's values, but then are you living these values?
Right.
So could you?
Okay, I got it. We're clear.
Yes.
The simple formula that I talk to people about is this idea of planning to action, thinking to action to reflection ratios. And I think that this is important. Decide on your beliefs, take an hour to decide on what your values are, and then take some time to act. And your actions, you're not necessarily going to be able to think while you're doing an action. A lot of the time we forget about it or something like that, or our actions are something that consume us. We put all of our effort in. So to be able to get this kind of awareness while you're doing an action is a little bit, what's the word I'm looking for? It's a dream. Don't do it. It's easier to separate it out. So take a reflection time. And so reflecting once a week or once a month, or just now, if you haven't defined your values yet, reflect on yourself and ask others to reflect on what you do. Get some feedback in there. So a very typical thing is, when I'm happy, what do I share with people? When I'm happy, what is it that made me happy about that interaction? So when I've just got a raving client, I love that. And cool, what exactly was it in there that made me so happy? And a lot of the time it was they found value. So great, this idea of contribution. How did I contribute to something that they found value to and that made me happy? So you've got this kind of little cycle on how you interact, and you could put that with anyone. You could put it with like your family. You could put it with people at the gym, your friends, whoever it is, people in your hobby communities. I gave value. I did an action. I contributed. What was valued out there, and that made me feel good about myself. And being able to take that cycle into account. A lot of people, they don't like this. They're like, but you should define it for yourself. But you are not alone. A human being is a social animal. I highly recommend that you check out something called the Pygmalion effect if you're curious about it. And it's the cycle about how others' beliefs about us shape their actions to us, shape our beliefs about ourselves, shape our actions around them as well. And so you get this cycle where we feed back to each other. So let's use that cycle to then determine, are these really our values? You know, does this make me feel valued? And when you communicate with someone, it's a good way to see what information, what data are you communicating as well. So when I talk to people and I'm like, and I'm going to make this much money, I can't believe it. I don't care about the money, but I care about feeling successful in that person's eyes. That's a vanity metric. That's something that I don't care about really, but I'm sharing it because I'm like, right, you care about this, don't you? You know, and trying to find like, well, what do I care about, and what is making me feel good or better? And as soon as you start comparing that conditioned metric, oh, money should mean, well, what about this idea that I'm helping people in a way that I love helping people? You know, I'm helping people in a way that makes me feel good. How many billionaires, you know, lack that feeling where they don't feel fulfilled in what they do, but they got the money to show for it, you know? So you've got this idea of fulfillment being separate because it's got to do with adding value. Cool. In what way matters to you? What do you say to people? And noticing that. And you can ask that question to people as well. What do I talk about when I'm happy?
Because I think this feedback loop, it's important to hold yourselves accountable, but you also got to see how that's impacting your, you know, the environment that you're in, whether it's on a personal side with your family and friends, but on the business side with your, you know, your colleagues, your clients, people that you do business with. So how do you revisit and check that? And I find it's like when you put out surveys to, you know, answer these questions, you know, some businesses, when they have so many clients, that is, you know, those options. And then you hope that a small percentage of them are answering to gather that data to confirm that, okay, you know, what we are trying to do as a business is also being well received, but there are also other values being, you know, felt by these clients that we weren't even aware that we were like living and providing. So I think sometimes it's like, yes, understand what the pillars are and the values and the core living values that you're, you know, are the foundation of your business. But unless you get that feedback from those around you, you may not be knowing what it is that they value. And I think this is important, that to curate and customize it is important if they're looking for something, or just realizing that's a value that you can't provide, and understanding that that's not, you know, within the business model, or from a personal standpoint, it's something that, once again, like you said, when you trim the fat to understand, you know, these adjectives, what is it that you live and breathe that you would stand up for and be like, this is who I am, or who I'm aspiring to be. So I think those are phenomenal points, and I'm going to read up more about, what was that feedback cycle that you said?
So it's got a couple of names, but one of the names is the Pygmalion effect, P-Y-G, Pygmalion, M-A-E-L-I-O-N, Pygmalion. It's named after like a Greek situation, tragedy, I'm sure, you know.
Amazing.
But the idea is that, yeah, it's a feedback loop that happens and it affects all of us. But there's something very important that you just said that I do think comes into it, where people say like, well, what's the point of having values or determining your values, especially with business, creating purpose? Let's say a business that has a purpose based on values, it actually creates employees that are more connected. Like you said, you know, you get alignment in your business. But what does that mean to just have employees that are all aligned? Well, actually, LinkedIn did a study in 2016 based on purpose specifically. And the
Yeah.
results that came back were that businesses with purpose made more money, businesses with purpose actually grew more, and businesses with purpose had a better retention of employees. They had less turnover. Why? Because their employees were engaged and actually felt happy to stay. They felt like this was a community for them to actually add value in. So it doesn't matter what job you were doing in that business, you just felt aligned with something bigger than yourself. And this is the whole point, is creating a community around you. So if you put up your flag and you say, this is my value, you're naturally going to attract people, you know? And so customer, lead generation becomes a lot easier because people are attracted to similar valued people.
Yeah, it's been amazing, like from our business standpoint, the amount of clients that when we start to converse and talk about all things outside of actually what they're in to, you know, whether they're ordering a bespoke suit or attend one of our soirees, there's a connection far deeper because there's an overlap of our living values.
Mm,
And uh, that was big as we were defining them, that you know, imagine if we were able to surround ourselves with like-minded individuals that shared these values. So they were broad enough where other people would either have these in their kind of short list or something that they're aspiring to do. So yeah, no, to know that there's that connection component. It goes beyond like the product side. It's on a much deeper level of connection. And
mm.
then when you have your list, it's like, what is your advice on, you know, living them? Like, how does, it's one thing to put it on paper to, you know, to finally define them. But, you know, when you look at people's actions, sometimes you know, when you actually hold yourselves accountable, it's like, okay, you're not living what you've stated as these living values.
Hmm.
So, how do you actually live them, hold yourselves accountable? What is your advice to people to actually, um, you know, at the end of the day, feel truly connected to this?
There are two things that I do, and I do them with myself, and this is how I can stay in line with my values, which is,
Yes.
you know, um, don't BS someone. That's one of my values. Don't BS someone. You know, don't overstate things. Don't over exaggerate. Don't under exaggerate. Don't BS. So I'm sharing what I do because I do this regularly.
Yes.
Number one is don't be afraid to change your values. Constantly look at any decision point is going to be where you're weighing up what to do and how to behave in a situation. Your values are determined in a decision, and you're always going to make a decision towards your values. So if you value like grit and hard work, that's great. And you're going to see that exemplified in your decisions, where you're going to choose to favor that in yourself or in others. I don't. One of my values is about strategy. I think we discussed it, elegant mental solutions. I love it when something is very well put together. It's very precise. It's had time and energy spent thinking about how people are going to execute something, design it, etc. So when I see a brute force solution, I use the word brute force versus grit, you know, and I don't appreciate either of them. I think that they're irrelevant. I do believe in taking action. I do believe in testing and measuring action. I do believe in putting in a certain amount. But when people just sit there and grit their teeth, I don't respond to it. So I always look at my actions anytime I've got a decision to make. And if I'm making these grit decisions, I need to look at that and say, am I acting in alignment? Or is grit actually my value? Do I
Yeah.
like to go to that because because I really naturally enjoy it? Or am I going to that because I'm conditioned into that? So there's always that thing of, is it a conditioned value, or is it something that I actually value and I enjoyed it? And you can normally find
Amazing.
out if you enjoy it or not. That's really the trigger. So just, it's based on feeling, but particularly judging yourself when you have a decision to make. And so that's part one. Be flexible. Be prepared to change your values, because maybe you're caught in a fantasy land where you think this should be my value because that was Bill Gates or Steve Jobs' values. It doesn't matter. And you're caught in this trap of thinking about success equals this value. You know, so that's
Just to,
point
just
one.
to speak about that, just because you brought up that good point,
Sure.
you could be very productive, but if that's not making you feel good, these values that you're living, at some point that success isn't going to be enough. Like there's not going to be
Yep.
enough money, there's not going to be enough clients. It's also because you're not feeling good in whatever these potential values are, even though it does provide success. I think there's something important about understanding and questioning constantly, what is it that makes you feel your strongest, feel your best, and also garners the results that is important for yourselves on a personal and professional level.
Exactly. Exactly. So that's I think that exactly that point is, this is one of the ways that we can kick the tires on our values and take a look, is this really our value, etc. Um,
And you had a second point that I interrupted. Apologies.
no, I think it's when you see like an alignment or a universality.
Yes.
Do I do this in business? Do I do this in my every time that I have a choice? Do I take this choice? Whether it be with food, whether it be with business, whether it be with my communities, or and reflecting on that. So your values will be something that transcends everything else.
Yes.
It's literally above them. And so
But
figuring that out as well, not just decisions with business, but every decision.
well, it's when you talk about this universe kind of. Uh, I think when you put out this energy and you're able to define your values, you are going to naturally gravitate and surround yourself with more people that share these. So it's one of my friends, Curtis, introduced me to this concept of, these um, unknown, like uncommon commonalities. And it's now these values that you have, actually other people have them, and it's without even conversing about them and sharing them. And then when you start talking, you realize, okay, there's alignment. Like, why are we
Mm.
like best friends out of nowhere? Like, how do we have so many things? But it's, there were, like I said, at a certain point of my business for X amount of years, I didn't define them. When we
Mm. Deep.
did, it had a profound impact, and we do revisit. But then the amount of friendships on a personal and professional level that I've been able to grow and build on, and to establish or find, it's amazing, and I don't think that's by chance.
Mm.
So I think it is, once you've done that, you don't know who you're going to be able to connect with that do share those and push you to live them even, more, and understand them. So I think that's
Well,
those 2 points are amazing. Thank you so
can
much.
you imagine what life would be like if we all walked around with our values like printed on our forehead, and we'd be like, hey, you and me, we both value honesty. That's incredible. You naturally gravitate towards these people, and that's why it's an amazing thing once you connect with people with similar values, but to invest time into experiencing that person until you actually discover, similar values. Like one look at you and I when we first met on the flight to London.
Yes.
I was wearing a hoodie and jeans with, I think I was wearing Vans,
Yes.
and you're in this beautiful suit with I still remember the double monk straps shoes. And I
Yes.
commented on them because I appreciated them. And then it turns out we both had the same book,
Yes.
and it's taking that chance to experience something, take an action, reflecting on that. You actually find out that through action, you can reflect and you can see, okay, cool. there is a result here. There's like for us, it was this shared value and
Yes.
a friendship that's now gone on since we met, which is
Yes,
incredible.
so true. Would you say in your, from a percentage standpoint, how many professionals would you say, like business owners, have done like a true exercise of defining their values? What would you say?
Um, so I think the data that LinkedIn
Yes,
produced was something like 38% of all companies are purpose driven, which means that they have defined, partially defined their values. So that's
62% of businesses haven't. That was
exactly
2016 research
2016,
by LinkedIn. So
if
let's
I'm
just
not
say
mistaken.
60% of people haven't. And I just highly encourage everyone, when you hear that, it's not easy to define them. It is something that I know if I wasn't working with a business coach, I wouldn't have been able to define what we stand for as a company as clear, and then break them down, and then, test them and see if we are living in accordance with them. So it's not a simple exercise. You do need to put in a lot of energy and effort, and in a lot of time you do need to use resources, whether that's a consultant or whether that's literature or a blend of both. And then the upside is that it can impact you not just for business only. This is on a personal level, what you can bring for yourself first and foremost, but then that can have an impact on your family, your friendship,
Mm,
and then your business, your community. So when you look at the upside of what being able to, this value metrics and being able to define your values as well as being able to live these, it's so worth it. And I can speak to that because I know for a portion of Style by Sarai's, since inception in 2012 to now we're at the middle of 2020, there was 5 years where I didn't have that. So these last 3 years, how much it's made an impact for ourselves, it's been profound. So I really want to say thank you so much, Justin, on discussing the world of values, in particular, value metrics today, and all of the great advice that you shared in this close to 40-minute call. Any other thing to share prior to wrapping up today's conversation?
Um, no, I think I think initially we started this conversation about like reading and bragging, like, oh, I've read 52 books this year, and actually getting away from that kind of number and falling in love with, I read one book and I really enjoyed that book and it changed my life and made me think about this, made me think about that, and going deeper into falling in love with the process. And eventually, like, we morphed the conversation into something about how do we focus on that enjoyment, that love, and it became a values conversation. So I like that idea that, be careful about doing things for others and make sure that you're falling in love with the process is basically the underlying big picture kind of sentence.
Yeah,
Fall in love with the process and you'll naturally attract clients, customers, friends, communities, etc. And you'll naturally attract a lot more fulfillment in your life. So I think that's a big summary for this conversation, which is good.
amazing. What a great ending. Thank you so much, Justin. And we will be having these ongoing conversations on different topics. Justin is well versed amongst many different topics. So if there's questions or topics that you want to dive deeper into, we'll be happy to entertain those and make this a live conversation that we do on a regular basis. So thanks again, Justin, for your time. And thanks for everyone that joined today. Ciao for
Absolute
now.
pleasure. Take care. Bye, Jason.
Bye.